Greetings, meat. Thank you for being our prey today. Before we begin, bite those like and subscribe buttons. It will help feed my hungry brood. And while you are at it, check out a place called Patreon for this meat snack. The access node is at the top of his page and in the description for this video recording. And let me also quickly mention his tier 4 patrons. Russ of the Frozen North, New 5 AC, and Nick. They sound delicious. And now, on with the mission debriefing. Meet the maw.
The Deathworlders, a story by Philip R. Johnson, a.k.a. Hambone, Hambone HFY, and Hambone 3110. Chapter 22, Warhorse, Part 6, Operation Nova Hound, Part 2. The Alpha of the Brood that Builds.
Interest. A human alpha, the first we have seen.
The Builder Alpha examined the perspective of the little insect-sized spy drone as it settled on the ceiling above the Deathworlder. The human infantry had appeared from nowhere, storming out of a supposedly empty room on the station's upper decks without warning. They might almost have materialized in that room fully formed. Impossible, of course, but then again, that kind of stealth technology was only marginally more credible, especially from a series so technologically behind the hunters. This particular specimen was clearly in command, having started by thrusting its arm out to indicate where its subordinates should go and what work they should do, and now poring over a diagram of that section of the station, directing the efforts of the other 11. The Alpha of Alphas was clearly intrigued also. It had a much more complete view of the battlefield than the Builder Alpha did, ensconced as it was in a kind of command throne that was designed to be interfaced with its neural augmentations and greatly expand its ability to track and consider the situation. It had proven itself in battle against these humans, receiving only minor wounds at worst. Now it was proving itself as a commander and leader.
Correction. Not just an alpha,
it mused.
Observation. Notice the markings on their armor. There are 3 different Deathworlder broods here. Each fulfills a different role. This is an alpha of many broods. It must be an individual of great importance.
The Builder broadcast understanding and agreement.
Fascination. Interesting that their broods function together through division of duty,
it commented.
Inspiration, and that displacement device, the possibilities. Satisfaction. Observing that device in action alone has been worth the price of this trap,
the Alpha of Alphas agreed.
Thoughtfulness. And the specialized behavior of their warriors can be translated to our own broods. This is valuable data.
They watched the Deathworlders slaughter lesser hunters by the dozen for some minutes. The violence was almost intimidating, even from a cloaked listening post far removed from the action. The lead team of 3 would enter a compartment, and every hunter within that compartment would be dead almost too quickly to fathom, cut down by withering volleys of disciplined firepower. There was an objective to it, though. They weren't killing for the sake of killing. Instead, every time the humans surged forward, it was to claim another little knot of surviving prey, pluck them from the hunter's grasp, and securing the meat the opportunity to escape. Dozens had escaped already, most of them important, high-value individuals whose deaths would have so demoralized the prey across the galaxy. Each dignitary that escaped to whatever sanctuary the Deathworlders had established beyond their displacement array was a personal insult to the Alpha of Alpha's plans. Why they should do so was so incomprehensible to the Alpha of the brood that builds. Why would superior life forms put themselves in harm's way to rescue inferior ones that were not even of the same brood or species? It sensed that there was no answer to that conundrum within the remit of engineering. For their part, the hunters' responses to human weaponry just didn't seem to be giving them the edge that the builder had hoped for. The guns were just too heavy and needed to be held in too specific a way so as to avoid injury. If only they could capture a working example of the weapons the humans themselves were using. As they watched, a family of spindly blue prey were herded into the territory the humans had seized and vanished through the displacement device. Just behind them was the wounded large prey, actually being carried by two of the Deathworlders. The builder revised its estimate as to human maximum muscle strength upwards by several percentage points.
Curiosity. Those two seem to prioritize the repair and evacuation of wounded prey,
it noted. Contempt.
Yes. While that is an obvious sign of weakness and wrong thinking, it will also potentially undermine our intimidation of the prey.
The Alpha of Alpha's thoughts were tinged with anger at this damage to their propaganda victory.
Suggestion. I submit we have gathered enough data. Those humans should be eradicated, their displacement device salvaged, and we should capture that alpha of many broods,
the builder proposed. It did not take the silence that greeted this idea for hesitation or contempt. The Alpha of Alphas had demonstrated its intelligence and cunning time and time again. It was undoubtedly mulling the suggestion over, considering the merits and potential risks.
Resolve. Agreed,
it sent at last.
I will deploy the strongest brood.
Regari's luck ran out the instant he dropped into the diplomatic yacht's hangar. Only the White Crest training that the mothers would have so despised had they known of it kept him from dying the moment he dropped from the vent and onto the deck. He hadn't seen the three hunters feasting on a brother of Clan Fireflight, but his pulse rifle snapped up and was firing the instant he saw them. 3 solid hits pulped the one holding a bizarre long gun in a shock-absorbing assemblage, and he dived aside, throwing down a shield stick to cover his retreat. Retaliatory pulse fire splashed against it. The latest generation, available only to Whitecrests, could admit pulse fire from the defender's side, and he used that feature to return fire, killing the last two even as their final pulse shot shattered his barrier. That had been too close. He turned to the ship and froze cold, realizing that the hunters had already crippled it, recognizing the fact that it was a possible escape craft. He had no way off the station. No, there had to be an alternative. Something he'd overlooked. A crawling sense of paranoia made him look up. The Alpha dropped from the ceiling like something obscene from one of Zhu's movies and smashed his gun out of his hands. Half as big again as its subordinates and much more heavily augmented, it kicked him, and Regari felt a rib jar painfully inside him as the blow flipped him through the air to slide on his back halfway across the hangar. Winded and injured, he still fought to find his feet, scrambled at his belt for his backup pulse pistol. That too was slapped aside by the Alpha, which used its other hand to grab him by the scruff of his neck and lift him off the deck, feet kicking and dangling. He wouldn't have been Regari if he hadn't fought for every last second, though. Down to just his claws, he raked the Nightmare's face, costing it 2 eyes and badly lacerating the flesh around a cluster of cybernetics that had replaced 3 of the others. It replied by biting off his left paw just above the wrist. It was an almost dainty gesture, and Hunter's teeth were so sharp that Regari was almost able to see it happening without feeling it. One moment it was his paw. The next, it was a meaty morsel, frothing blood in the creature's mouth, crunching and splintering as the hunter bit through the bone to swallow what had once been part of him. It laughed. There was no epithet in Gowrie to describe how much he hated it for that. The beast gloated, savoring its kill. He snorted nasal mucus and spat it into the creature's remaining eye, too proud to give it the satisfaction of fearing it. He hated it, hated everything it stood for, and his last thought was to hope fervently that it would choke on him. Instead, its head twitched to look over its shoulder, and it dropped him, bringing up one of those large, long guns. Those guns were clearly heavy, though, too heavy to respond in time. Its head exploded, painting a grisly slurry of meat, matter, and cybernetic parts all over the deck, and the most glorious sight in the galaxy double-timed across the hangar, guns snapping from corner to corner in case of any lingering threats. By all the clans of Gao, an actual human, built like a bunker and faceless in an armored vacuum suit layered in technology, but unmistakably a Deathworlder. Nothing else could conceivably have moved so easily while carrying so much. "You're late," he chided out of pure bravado. "You're alive," the human replied, setting to work on the stump of his arm. Regari reached across to retrieve his pulse pistol with his remaining hand and holstered it. He was keeping on top of the pain, barely, and having that little task to focus on while the human stopped his bleeding by injecting some kind of foam directly onto the wound, which hardened and stopped the blood flow almost instantly, kept him from crying out from agony and fainting. "Come on, compadre, you're not getting out of here on that shuttle," the human said. He slung his gun around his shoulder, tugged a smaller one from a belt holster, tucked an arm under Regari, and hoisted him firmly but gently off the floor. It was like being a cub again, riding on an adult's shoulders. The diplomatic quarters outside were exactly the kind of hell his imagination and sense of hearing had suggested as he crawled through the fence. There were bodies everywhere, many of them clearly cut down from behind as they tried to flee. Intermingled with them were hunter corpses, however, clearly fallen where they had been feasting, many still with dripping shreds of flesh caught in their fangs. Two more humans in those armored vacuum suits were firing stubby little black weapons at something through a doorway. Not missing a beat, his rescuer dropped his shoulders and surged past their firefight, shielding Regari with his own body. This brought them into view of another human, just in time for Regari to watch him sidestep a charting beta and punch it so hard in the side of its jaw that the head was all but torn off. The huge corpse crashed into the bulkhead and left a purplish blood stain. "Where?" Regari began. He made it no further than that, because an explosion an order of magnitude larger than anything that had previously rocked them punished the deck. The lights died, and artificial gravity went with them just for a second, before the damaged control systems found an alternate power source for them. Emergency lighting, dark and blue, at least robbed the carnage of its more stomach-turning hues. The humans clearly heard an order via some means he wasn't party to, because all of them began to fall back under fire towards the recreational concourse. The one carrying him picked up his speed to the point where Regari could feel a breeze in his fur. There were hunters on the concourse, but unlike any that Regari had ever heard of. Gone were the usual cruel cybernetics. In fact, gone were whole limbs. And in place of the natural, sickly white of hunter flesh was a horrible, wet, meaty redness which bulged and pulled in grotesque ways as they moved. Whatever these hunters had done to themselves had granted them the strength to move confidently and swiftly, even layered in thick armor plates while carrying large weapons. They were huge, as big, if not bigger, than the Alpha that had nearly killed him, and moving with a sturdy, graceful precision that was more like a human's motions, and these ones seemed to be handling their guns just fine, pouring a hail of firepower into the water feature that three more human soldiers were using for cover. His rescuer's gun hand came up, and the pistol's sharp crack was a very different noise to the heavy, explosive industrial thunder being made by the hunter weaponry. Unlike them, his aim was sharp and precise. One of the abominations choked and collapsed as the rounds ripped into exposed gaps at the sides and flanks. But two of its friends turned to face the new threats, with bullets sparking off shields and armor plates as they returned fire, squinting against the glare from the bright light mounted below the pistol's barrel. Regari was jolted badly when his carrier then jinked into cover and he was let go of. Even if the human was trying to be gentle, being carried by a Deathworlder was clearly a dangerous experience. He kept his head down. There was more gunfire, shouting. The deck plating shook. "They're coming up the left!"
"They're fucking suicidal. Baseball, rebar, get up on the right there."
The deck plating dented under their weight as the Pin 3 dashed from where they'd been hiding and made it into cover beside him. "Good shooting, Hoss. Anyone hurt?" "I took a hit. Didn't penetrate. Those guns of theirs hit hard, though." "Watch the ones coming up the middle." "Fuck! Nerve jam!" "Oh, no, you don't." Regari felt an icicle was pounded into his brain as a grenade went off nearby.
"Man down!" "Get him back here. Suppressing fire."
A storm of shooting, heavy footfalls, more shouting, and something large was dragged into cover alongside of him. One of the humans convulsing and twitching in his armor.
"They're still coming!" "Throwing grenade! Frag out!"
An explosion that left his ears ringing in protest. Station damage alarms started wailing nearby, adding to the chorus of violence. "How is he?" "He needs to be jumped to the triage right now, sir." There was a deadly, horrible pause.
"Fucking. Can we make the array?"
"I don't think so, sir."
"Thor, demolish it. We're EA jumping."
"Major, he's dead, sir."
"Aye. Grab the ETs and fall back. That way. Legsy, Highland, cover the retreat."
Regari was hoisted up with Deathworlder strength and carried. There were 3 others with him, a Kortai and 2 Kurumbura, who seemed to be equally as petrified by the rescuers as by the hunters. "You are being rescued. Please do not resist." He could see over his carrier's shoulders as they ran. The one in charge paused long enough to tap some commands on the computer he carried, and the dead soldier's armor started smoking, then burst into flames. The one carrying him muttered something. His helmet decided the Soto-voice delivery was not intended for translation, but Regari understood just enough English to understand him. "Goodbye, Sterling." "Get in his bag, quickly now." The Kortai was clearly one of the political delegation and not accustomed to taking orders gracefully. "What exactly is an EA jump, and why am I being stuffed into a bag for it?" he demanded. The human commander clearly had no patience for Kortai games.
"It means exo-bloody atmospheric. We are going to jump out of this station and land on that planet. So put on the fucking bag," he snapped.
Behind his pressure helmet, his eyes promised trouble the likes of which no alien could comprehend if he was not obeyed. The Kortai squeaked and practically dove into the bag. Regari had already been mostly into his, but he balked about hearing this jump. The human whose chest the bag was strapped to nodded and pushed him down gently but firmly, helping him curl up inside it. "Yep," he said. "Is that safe?" "Hell no. Beats being eaten by hunters, though." He tugged the bag over Regari's head and sealed it. It instantly pressurized, filling with sweet atmosphere that was a welcome relief to the meat-tasting foulness he'd been breathing. There was a little transparent window for him to see out of, and through it he saw 2 of the humans each stick a large brick of something onto the outside station wall. There was muffled speech, then shouting as the humans who had stayed behind retreated into the room, still shooting. They slammed and sealed the door. An instant later, a titanic detonation shook the room.
"Claymore?"
the commander asked. "Yep, there's more coming down, but they're being careful now."
"Right. Last seal check. Blow it on my go."
The humans scrambled to check each other's suits, and all loudly declared them satisfactory. Then the one carrying him turned away and hunkered down and... Losing his hand turned out to only be the second most violent thing that happened to Regari that day. The first was any station dweller's nightmare, the total catastrophic failure of an outside wall, and the resulting depressurization that flung them and everything else in the room out into space. Crushing G-forces caused him to black out for a second. Hey, you still with me in there? The voice was coming from a small handheld device attached by a coiled wire to the same panel on the inside of his bag that was providing Rigari's breathable air. Tinny and quiet as it was, it still seemed loud enough inside the bag, which was basically silent apart from the faint sounds of air being exchanged and of Rigari's own body. He grabbed it and tentatively pressed the button on the side. Yes, I'm still with you. Good news, man. We're alive and re-entering just fine. Rigari had to produce a bitter chirp at that one. Oh yes, everything is absolutely perfect, he commented. Better than being eaten. What's your name, compadre? Rigari. Officer Rigari of Clan Whitecrest. Cool. Call me Warhorse. Rigari pushed his nose up to the window of his bag, which was now a taut cylinder. He could just make out the human's arms on either side of him, and beyond that, only Capital Station and tumbling, burning lights. Warhorse sounded more like a code name to him than the human's real name. But he wasn't going to argue. Goodness knew he'd gone by plenty of assumed identities in his duties. So, atmospheric re-entry without a spacecraft, he said. I assume this suit of yours is equipped for it? Technically, everything about this suit is so classified I can't tell you shit about it, man. But, you'll figure it out if it is or isn't by the way we do or don't burn up, Warhorse told him. How comforting. Ha! They fell in silence for a while. There was a pale blue glow just building up past the limb of Warhorse's limbs when Rigari finally spoke. I'm curious. Why? Why what, man? The Dominion treated you... He spoke in English as best as a Gowan mouth could. Like shit. You lost a presumably elite soldier today. One of the very fucking best, Warhorse agreed. There was an emotional edge to his voice, but Rigari couldn't interpret what edge that might be. Not that it was difficult to guess. Not to belittle his sacrifice, he said carefully. But why? Hey, I don't know the why of it, man, Warhorse replied. But my whole thing is saving lives. That's like my job, my purpose in life. So I'm just doing what I do, You lost a man, Rigari repeated. Yeah, and I'm going to miss him like crazy. He was one of my brothers, man, but we saved 50? 60? That many? Something like. Still, risking 12 elite human soldiers to save 50 or 60 ungrateful politicians. A life is a life, man. Doesn't matter if it's human, Gowan, Kurumbura, or that little gray fuck at baseball's chest. There was a flicker of orange light. Re-entry plasma? Yeah, force field should handle it just fine. Just sit back and enjoy the fireworks. Ah, fireworks, Rigari nodded. I had a human friend once. She showed me video footage of fireworks. I always thought it would be fun to see them. Human friend? Shoo. The translator spat out Warhorse's response in the form of the Gowrie word for footwear, with a questioning uptick. Her real name has this awkward sound at the start, like shh, but more buzzing. Wait, not Jew? You had a Jewish friend? I don't know what that is. Her name was a longer and flatter sound. She said she was Chinese-Canadian. Ah, right, gotcha, yeah. Most other humans struggle with Chinese names, too. The plasma outside was now a steady orange torrent. The bag's window was clearly photosensitive because it had darkened a welder's mask black in order to protect his eyes from the contrail's incandescence. Then the shaking started. Is it meant to do this? You got me, compadre. This is the first time I've done it. Not even in training. Too dangerous for training. Hold on. Rigari curled up, resisting the urge to let his claws out, and shut his eyes, wishing against all rationality that he could be a cub again as he and Warhorse became a fireball together. And fell. The eternity of being about to die ended in a metallic noise, the wheeze of cloth against cloth, and a jolt nearly as violent as the one that had flung them from the station. What was that?" he asked. He hadn't thought to press the button on the communicator, but now Warhorse's voice came through to him from the outside of the bag, slightly muffled, but no more than that. They had atmosphere. "Parachute. Worst part's over, compadre. We're almost down safe. You okay?" "What's left of me is doing fine." "Bueno. Last hit coming up in 3, 2... Regari grimaced as there was a thump and several jolts before the human fell down backwards, careful to let Regari fall on top rather than the other way around. There were some more metallic clinks, a rustling of fabric, and then the top of his bag tore off. Warhorse looked in. "You okay?" he asked. Regari climbed out of the bag as best he could with only one paw, and collapsed on his back, gulping like a stranded fish. "I never want to do anything like that ever again," he stated. Warhorse just lay beside him and chuckled. The chuckle turned into a laugh, and he surged to his feet and ripped off the helmet and mask of his pressure suit, revealing a stubbly fuzz of head hair on a deep, nut-colored skin. Still laughing, he threw the helmet high into the air, shrugged off the parachute harness and rucksack, then spread his arms and howled. The noise was agony, a primal roar of defiance aimed at the universe, which impaled Regari's sensitive ears and straight through into the pain centers of his brain. Warhorse seemed to have gone mad, jumping and swearing and punching the air, always returning to that same "woo" sound. Regari watched in alarm as the human did a double backflip in what must have been to him extremely low gravity. Then stopped, ripped a stone from the turf that was as big as Regari's head, and threw it hard at a nearby tree before collapsing, giggling, on his back. The stone hit the tree with such incredible force that it lodged in the wood. A second later, creaking, crackling, hissing, and groaning, the tree fell over. Warhorse's laughter died, and he sat up. "Geez, did I do that?" Regari scowled at him. "This is the only known Class 2 planet. You're a native of a Class 12. You could probably ruin this planet's whole biosphere just by breathing on it, if you aren't careful." Warhorse blinked as he stood up. "Didn't catch one word of that, man." He looked around. "Where the fuck is my helmet?" Regari picked it up and offered it to him, feeling his arm wobble from the weight. "Thanks, man." Warhorse wriggled it back onto his head, muttering angrily to himself. "Fucking amateur, Ares. Don't be stupid. Never remove your helmet, dumbass." "I said," Regari repeated when it was back on and the translator was working again, "that we're standing on the only known Class 2 planet in this galaxy, and you're from a Class 12. You could do serious harm if you're not careful." "Shit," Warhorse nodded agreement. "You're right. Sorry." "You'd better not do that either, or you'll definitely kill this world," Regari added. "I know, man. I live on Cimbrian," Warhorse told him, twisting a helmet back and forth until it was firmly in place and the docking collar re-engaged with a solid snap. He checked it was seated properly by throwing his head back and forth a bit and wriggling his shoulders. "Thanks for the reminder, though." "How heavy is that helmet?" Regari asked. 25 pounds base weight, Warhorse replied. "Which, yeah, sucks." He rearranged some of his equipment and shrugged the ruck back on again as if it was nothing, causing Regari's boggling over the helmet to intensify. He'd experienced for himself just how strong Zhu had been, but between the stone, that rucksack, and the easy way he carried Regari himself and all the other gear back on the station, it was plain Warhorse vastly outstripped her. The human pressed firmly on the side of his helmet. "Stainless, Warhorse," he announced. "Arrived DZ, one healthy ET in tow. I'm at, He checked the device in his hand and reeled off a string of numbers. "Seeking cover and awaiting orders." There was silence for a few seconds, and then, "Warhorse, Stainless, I have your DZ. Seek cover and rest up. Turn to TACNEC 394 Tango November Juliet and await further. Out." Warhorse grunted and looked around, scanning the horizon with those predator's eyes. "There," he pointed, Regari squinted and could see the shimmer of water cascading down a rocky outcrop, carving a tree-haunted valley. "How far is that?" he asked. 3 clicks or so. I jog further than that before breakfast." "Ah, yes, human endurance running," Regari sighed. "I'm going to slow you down, aren't I?" "Nah, man, climb on." Regari flattened his ears disbelievingly. "You can't be serious." "Gravity this low? I need something to weigh me down," Warhorse replied. "Besides, what do you mass, like 90 pounds? I could lift you one-handed in twice this gravity, no problem." The translator fed him a Gowrie measurement that sounded about right, so he nodded, imitating the gesture he'd often seen Zhu use. Warhorse just returned the gesture and waved a hand towards the pack on his shoulders. Regari paused, then twitched his whiskers resignedly, and did as the human suggested, clambering up the bag to sit atop it. It wasn't dignified, but Warhorse didn't appear to notice the extra weight. "Man, we should put a machine gun up there for you or something," he chuckled. "How about optics or that map of yours?" Regari suggested. "Good thinking. Binos are in that front pocket there." Warhorse handed up the map device. It was alarmingly short on detail, and Regari said so. Warhorse just nodded. "Relax, Intel's got our back. We'll have a better map pretty soon." They headed out. Warhorse quickly settled into a steady rhythm of big, long bounding strides that ate up the ground, and just kept going. It wasn't quite running, so much as a vigorous, fast march, and it was deceptive. Regari wouldn't have guessed they were moving very fast, but when he glanced behind them, he saw their landing site was already distant and receding. He played with the binos, adjusting their width, having to set them to their widest to fit his own face. But once he did so, and toyed with the wheel on top and its functions, he swiftly got the hang of it. It was strange, handling a piece of human technology, made by humans for human use. It certainly didn't feel like a lower tech species gear either. It may have lacked a few of the advanced features he'd have found in a Gowan equivalent, but optically it was superb. The only real burr in his fur that he could find to complain about was their heaviness. Warhorse wasn't even breathing heavy when they stopped again. Regari chittered a little on a surge of cynicism. Their resting spot was as stereotypical of a low-class world as it could be. A gentle glade fed by a clean bubbling stream with a pool in which slender silver fish were undulating. Idyllic. Warhorse ignored it. Instead, he let Regari off his back and shucked off the ruck before examining the dressing on Regari's arm. "Any pain? Itching?" he asked. "No, but it feels like the paw is still there," Regari said. It was a strange sensation. He could still grip and move his fingers. But of course nothing happened, except that what was left of his muscle sheath on his forearm twitched pathetically as it tried to flex and twist and pull on the now absent tendons of his now absent paw. He sat down and stared at the dressing as Warhorse made a satisfied noise and pottered about, setting up a basic camp. "You okay?" he was asked after a while. Regari chirped a bitter little laugh. "I'm supposed to be one of the elite," he said. "Clan Whitecrest, foremost commandos and security specialists of the whole Gowan species. But next to the hunters, I may as well have been a cub. Next to you..." Warhorse had sat up next to the pool and was digging through his bag. "Nah, man, you're a fucking badass," he replied. "What was that expression? Pull the other one? Only please don't, because I'd like to get off this planet with at least 3 whole limbs." "Totally serious, compadre. What did you do to that hunter? Clawed out 2 of his eyes and spat in a 3rd. And that was a fucking alpha. You've got spirit, bro." Regari snorted. "Spirit doesn't count. Only results matter," he snapped dismissively. "You got the result, though," Warhorse said. When Regari twisted a disbelieving ear at him, he nodded insistently. "Seriously, you're alive. You held out long enough for the cavalry to reach you, and you saw that son of a bitch dead. Result." "You're just trying to pep me up," Regari told him. Warhorse nodded. "Of course I am. Best way to do that is with the truth, though. You're still kicking. It's not. And the difference was you going down swinging. Spirit gets results, man." Regari sat silently and watched. The The human soon made a satisfied noise and pulled out a handful of flat brown packs of some kind and scooped up some water from the pool in a little bottle. There was a pump of some kind on the bottle's end, and after a few enthusiastic strokes of that, the water was forced back out through the filter nozzle. "Are you filtering and purifying that?" Rigari asked. "This is a Class 2 planet. You don't need to." "Basic survival rule where I'm from. Never trust the water." "We're not on where you're from." Warhorse paused, then shrugged. A good habit's a good habit." He held up the little brown packages from the ruck. "Hungry?" "You're eating now. We only just landed." "Every chance I get. Never know when the next opportunity is going to arrive in a situation like this." "But how are you going to cook it without a fire? If you build one, won't the hunters?" "Relax, we got that covered. Besides, there's a long way to go ahead of us. I'm going to need the nutrition, whereas the hunters only might come looking for us." "Oh, well, I do like human food." This is just an MRE, not fine dining. Kind of the tastier alternative to those ration balls," Warhorse said, opening the package and tipping most of the contents out onto his lap. He tipped a little sachet of white powder into his bottle and shook it, turning the water a vivid pink, then took off his breathing mask and sipped it. "What's that?" Rigari asked. "Juice. Electrolytes, sugar, hydration." Warhorse sipped again, then licked his lips, frowning. "Supposedly, it tastes like cherry." "Supposedly?" "Look, if you want one of these to try, because I can eat whatever's too much for you." "If it's safe." "It's all been treated with gamma radiation, man. Totally sterile, I promise." "Then, yes, please." Warhorse nodded and examined the available options. "I warn you, man, this is the high-performance version. It's meant to get a fuckload of energy into me first and foremost. The culinary experience is like a distant second," he pointed out. "I'll try it anyways. You're right, nutrition in a situation like this is important." Warhorse nodded and stuffed the rest of the MRE back into its pack. "Damn right." He ripped off the top of a couple of transparent bags, slipped the unappetizing green pouches of food inside, then added a little water before returning the bags to their cardboard box and leaning them against a rock. Within seconds, steam was rising from the boxes. "How does that work?" Rigari asked. "Chemical reaction." "Clever," Rigari commented. "No flame, no smoke, minimal heat signature." "That's the idea," Warhorse agreed. Rigari watched him cook, silently calculating how to eat his meal one pod. His nose twitched involuntarily when Warhorse kneaded a little sachet and then spread the off-white paste it contained onto his dry crackers. The scent thus unleashed was creamy and rich, hinting that his dismissive assessment of the meal's quality had probably been unfair. Sadly, when Rigari sampled the crackers while waiting for the main course to be ready, he was sorely disappointed, and Warhorse was right. While the beverage was clearly supposed to taste like fruit, what it mostly tasted of was chemistry. "What's this?" he asked, opening and sniffing it. The scent was pungent and sugary. "It's called a hua bar," Warhorse said. "I wouldn't, man. That thing's got like 1,000 calories in it." The translator paused while translating that figure, and Rigari could see why. It must have been doing an internal error check to make sure there wasn't some mistake. That was half a week's nutrition intake for a Gowan male. That many? Yep. Warhorse took the bar off him and bit into it, chewing vigorously. "Give your jaw a workout too," he added around the mouthful. "Exactly how many calories do you need?" Rigari asked. "Me, on a light day? At least 10,000 or so," Warhorse replied. "But this is going to be a really active day, so a lot more. Anyways, Maine should be ready." Between a small rock and leaning the bag against what remained of his left forearm, Rigari was able to hold it steadily enough to poke at it with the spoon. While it certainly looked appetizing enough, his nose was practically being overwhelmed by the rich scent. He tried it. One mouthful was enough. "Great father, phew!" he coughed. Warhorse just laughed. You okay? It's like eating a candle. Like I said, man, performance first, pleasant eating experience second. Don't worry, you gave it a pretty good go for an ET, he said, ripping his own back open and mixing in the contents of a tiny glass bottle of red sauce. Regari licked the sauce out of his fur, regaining his composure. ET? Extraterrestrial. It's a friendly way of saying non-human. You have other ways? Sure. ET is friendly, non-human is all formal and proper, and Xeno is an insult. Warhorse inhaled most of his meal in 3 efficient scoops. For the human friend of yours, he said around the mouthful before swallowing. Jew? Close enough. How'd you meet? There's not a lot of us out here. She an abductee? Regari made an affirmative ducking nod. Yes, about 11 Gowrie years ago now, one of our settler transports was raided by mercenaries working for an... He raised his paws and made a finger quotes gesture that Zhu had been fond of, only realizing that the effect was spoiled a little by his missing a paw after he'd done it. Unauthorized researcher. He snorted. So the Cortai Directorate claims, anyways. They killed all the males and abducted the females and cubs. Warhorse's expression darkened, even as he leaned over and stole Regari's leftovers. Coño de madre, he snarled. The translator didn't seem to have a readily available equivalent, but the intent was clear. Shu was picked up separately, but kept in the same holding cell, Regari continued. Thanks to her, they were able to escape. Where do you come in? There was political fallout. Ima, the leader of the abducted females, fought fang and claw to get Shu adopted into the clan of females. Most of the other females sided with her, of course, but some of the male clans... Yeah? Warhorse took another mouthful. I thought you guys mostly went along with the females. Regari chittered. I thought you guys were dangerous, disease-ridden predators, he countered. Granted, many of my clan are ruled more by their testicles than by their brains, but the females don't hold absolute power, just a strong influence. They may hold the veto, but they still want to mate just as much as the males do. Warhorse chuckled again. Yeah, that sounds about right, he agreed. What did you think? I didn't. I was too focused on the blow to my career. Your career? Regari made an uncomfortable noise. It's complicated. I'm a medic, compadre. I can handle complicated. Regari wobbled his head sideways in a fair enough gesture. I had some disagreements with the clan, he said. This was early on in our negotiations with the Dominion, and I was part of the inquiry into the missing transports. We had all of the circumstantial evidence we could have wanted that proved there were Dominion species involved, and that this unauthorized researcher was anything but nothing concrete. Meanwhile, I found out that the Whitecrest clan, and several other powerful clans, were all preparing as if our membership to the Dominion was a foregone conclusion, buying shares and equipment, training and indoctrinating our new brothers a certain way, that kind of thing. You suspected corruption in your own ranks, Warhorse guessed. No, I wasn't so cynical back then. I was appalled, of course. As far as I was concerned, even circumstantial evidence that the Dominion was involved in our transports going missing, and complacency is collusion as far as I'm concerned, was reason enough to abandon the negotiations on the spot and approach the Kelsey Alliance. Of course, now I know that the Alliance is just as bad, but... He shook himself. Rather than discussing the matter with some of my more seasoned brothers, I took it straight to one of the fathers, convinced that it was an honest oversight, and that when they saw the evidence we had gathered, the mistake would be corrected. Bad move? The father I approached was one of the, quiet conspirators. Not one of the obvious beneficiaries of the deal, but still very much involved, and who stood to gain. What happened? He promoted me. Warhorse paused in pouring the last of the gravy into his mouth. Come again? To the rank of White Crest attaché to the Mother Supreme, part of her executive staff, and if need be, her bodyguard. A prestigious career move on the face of it. The reality? He sniffed. Warhorse just sat and listened, so Regari pressed on. The reality was I was not now involved in the investigation, was no longer part of the clan's decision-making process, was a pariah in the inner circle, and, though I theoretically had the ear of the Mother Supreme, actually using it might have been seen as meddling in female affairs, which would have politically and reproductively ruined me. They declawed you. Regari winced. The turn of phrase was intimately disturbing for Gowans. That's an accurate description, he conceded. Warhorse nodded his understanding, starting in on the second hoo-ah bar. Regari shook his head in disbelief. What do you have in there? A black hole? So what happened? Warhorse asked, ignoring the jab. Regari grinned, emulating the human gesture. Shu did. Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. I am the Casual Deathworlder, your host, and this has been Part 2 of Chapter 22, Part 6. I hope you enjoyed listening to it as much as I enjoyed bringing it to you. If you did, go ahead and smash those like and subscribe buttons down there, and perhaps drop us a comment down below, and maybe consider going and visiting us over on Patreon. Lots of cool stuff going on over there. Now, as always, huge shout out to my editor, Gregor. Thank you very much, buddy, and once again, I wholeheartedly apologize for this mangled mess that I'm handing you. Good luck. Okay. We are just ever so slightly shy of the halfway point in this chapter, so we're moving along. All right, so question, who's got the question? Okay, so does anybody think that SpaceX will actually get Starship and Super Heavy working properly enough to meet their goal of doing the first manned flight to Mars next year? Personally, I don't, and I think it'll happen eventually. I just don't think it's going to happen within that timeline. But, yeah, leave your answers in the comments down below. In the meantime, be safe, be well. I love you all. Bye-bye.